A very good morning to all. On behalf of our technical team, I, Dr. Rutra Mohan, welcome you to this webinar on Lamas Giving Birth with Confidence. The resource person for today is Dr. Vijaya Krishnan. This webinar is being streamed live on IAP India YouTube channel. I request everyone to subscribe to this channel to get regular notification during our webinars. You can also follow our updates on IAP Facebook page. This webinar is being organized by IAP Women Nagpur, Maharashtra. The moderators for today's session are Dr. Megha Ladha, Dr. Sonal Bhagat, and Dr. Pallavi Zade. I request the moderators to start with the session.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Megha Ladha. So, uh, right. Let me first introduce to you about IAPWC. IAPWC functions under the guidance of National Head Dr. Ruchi Varsne and IAP President Executive Dr. Sanjeev Jha. We have 5 zones in India with heads for each zone. Dr. Pooja Kamble is the West Zone Head. The state team of IAPWC Maharashtra includes state coordinators Dr. Suvarna Ganvir ma'am, joint coordinator Dr. Snehal Patel, and sub-coordinators Dr. Uttara Mohan, Dr. Priya Karade, and Dr. Nirali Sangvi. In Maharashtra, IAPWC has conducted 40 plus low cost activities like CME, workshops, public awareness campaign, health camps in various districts since 2018. We have also organized around 31 webinars in past 3 months on topics such as PNF for trunk, NDT, kinetic chain activation techniques, fitness testing, SCI, rehab, PCOD, ICF, etc. In first corporate meet, Maharashtra got the Best State IAPWC award. We are constantly working towards expanding the scope of activities and workshops for the benefit of our profession. We would appreciate your feedback on our webinar. Please do submit the feedback form, which is going to be there in our link. In this link, you may also give suggestions for webinar topics which you would like to attend. And to know more about all these events, please do follow us at IAP Women's Cell Facebook page and IAP Facebook page. Today, our webinar is on Lamas Giving Birth with Confidence. Is being conducted by Nagpur district. Dr. Megha Ladha, myself, I am the district coordinator. Dr. Sonal Bhagat and Dr. Pallavi Zade are the district sub-coordinators. Even during this webinar, if you have any queries and questions, you please ask the resource person by putting it in the chat box. This webinar, we are going YouTube live too. This was all about IAPWC, but now let me introduce our resource person, Dr. Vijaya Krishnanan. It's my pleasure to introduce to you ma'am. So, Dr. Vijaya Krishnan is a certified professional midwife and a co-founder and director of Healthy Mother Sanctum, Natural Birth Center, and leading official Lamas certified childbirth educator in India. She teaches Healthy Mother Lamas accredited childbirth educator program in order to educate and certified Lamas educator all over India. She runs the Healthy Mother Breastfeeding Support Network. With a doctorate in physical therapy and specialization in women's health, she has also created a gamut of wellness programs for women throughout the entire reproductive cycle. At her natural birth center, Sanctum, she has pioneered a unique collaboration model of care where women receive independent midwife care through preconception, her pregnancy, labor, birth, and postpartum. with backup support in case if there is some emergency. She had emergency infrastructure too. She believes strongly that respectful maternity care is the most important key for helping a woman to have an informed and empowered birth. Her articles have published many in Midwifery Today and many more. She has lectured widely and has been conducting workshops at a lot of universities and medical colleges and nursing colleges. She was invited at Midwifery Today International Conference over last 3 years in Germany and Belgium. She has been awarded as Lifetime Achievement Award for the services given to Mother Brain for her tireless efforts for making birth as a normal physiological event. In the interest of time, I would quickly want Dr. Vijaya Krishnan ma'am to take over the proceedings and guide us that what physiotherapist can do apart from just telling antenatal and postnatal exercises, so as we can help the woman in the childbirth process. So quickly over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, Vijaya ma'am, unmute yourself, please.
There we go. Okay. Because I
Yes.
said, all right, very well. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And I'm so honored to be here today amongst you all. And Megha, thank you for making this happen because you have been the sort of driving force behind it. And in many ways, this feels like sort of coming home because I started my career I graduated in 1989. I don't know if some of you were born then, but I started my career in 1989 as I graduated as a physical therapist from MSU University in Baroda. I did my first master's in All India Institute of Physical Medicine, Mumbai University. At those times, there was literally nothing available in terms of all the private colleges, and there were two available for people who were outside of Maharashtra to get them into the master's program over there. So it was pretty incredible to be in that scope and field, but it was amazing experiences. I worked in the day I used to do my master's program. Nighttime we used to work at Breach Candy Mumbai Hospital for ICU and chest physical therapy because I was interested in that, and I was exploring lots of things. And I want to start this off by saying all this because life takes different pathways and it changes you differently, and you can it, you can have a passion, you can have two passions, you can do things together. Nothing goes waste. And I find sometimes we struggle to really believe in what we are and what we do. And I think that's very important to sort of have that grounding and rooting. Physical therapy gave me that. And then I have a second master's from the University of Massachusetts Lowell. I went to the US at that point of time. It was, I wouldn't say easy, but the process was much more easeful in terms of going to the US on a job visa. I landed up going to the US in 1992, 93. I landed up, after several years, obviously, landed up doing my second master's in physical therapy, clinical, like just as a overall clinical, physical therapy, and then landed up doing my doctorate in physical therapy in women's health. So I've had a long journey doing all of that. And then also parallelly landed up being mothers to my two sons. So I think that started off my journey into a very different field, exploring a different field, which was very necessary on a personal level at that point of time, and fitted in beautifully into my core capacities of research and also teaching. I love teaching, and that was sort of what landed up putting me into Lamaze. We moved back to India in 2003, and then between that and now, I landed up figuring out how the situation in maternity care is, because I was doing part of a research project in University of Massachusetts, and we ended up talking to a lot of women who were, in the current maternity care system and discovered very rapidly that women had no choice in childbirth. And it's the same thing right now as well. Some of you who are listening to it are probably mothers yourself. Some of you have, are yet to experience that. Some of you may have experienced it through other women whom you treat or see in the antenatal or postnatal period. Some of you have experienced birth touches everyone, right? You might have a niece or a nephew or someone who was born or neighbors. There is not a single person whom birth doesn't touch. I remember very vividly. I was invited to this Rotary Club, evening sort of talk, and there was this 80-plus-year-old gentleman who, after my talk, came to me and said, when my wife was pregnant several years ago, she took hypnobirthing classes. We were in the UK. So what I'm saying is birth touches everyone. So that's how I landed up, exploring Lamaze. I was already teaching in the US, came here, realized that there was nothing, and started Lamaze as teaching one-to-one couples, and then landed up in understanding that there is nothing that the woman can access which is true to the Lamaze core principles. And eventually we started our birth center. 12 years of starting the birth center now, 11 years of starting the birth center now. So it's been a really wide journey. But why I started to say all this is you can never take the physical therapist out of me. I do what I do, and that part is amazing and beautiful, and seeing babies being born every single day is an amazing gift. But I also feel that here are my hands, which can feel tightnesses, which can adjust things, which can, as a midwife too, I feel that. But as a therapist too, I can very easily recognize what's off. How can I move how can I help this woman move in a certain way that can help her pelvis be better aligned? Can I, soften a round ligament tightness? Can I help the woman's pelvis? Can I help the sacroiliac joint be a little bit more aligned, that the baby will pass easily to the birth canal? So a lot of this comes from a lot of experience. But without further delay, I just wanted to have this introduction so that you guys don't think, why is this significant to me? I wanted this introduction because I see a lot of therapists actually enroll for my Lamaze childbirth educator workshops without really understanding what Lamaze is. And hopefully what Megha has done today is to open up this avenue for physical therapists to actually understand what is Lamaze. So I'm going to share my screen and we will start off. Okay, so I talked to you a bit about myself. Let me go to the next one. Okay, so here is the scene of birth in India. Until a few years ago, few decades ago, midwives were still the keepers of birth. Now, when you think of a midwife, what comes into your mind? It comes that there is a dai. She is perhaps old, she's perhaps uneducated, and she is doing things that in India, especially with all our caste and all our structures of who does what work, we think of her as a lower socioeconomic strata woman coming in and working with the woman to give birth. I won't go into too many details of that because time is limited. There is a lot of misconceptions about that as well. But the other component is our...
Ma'am,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. Can you
Yeah.
put your slides on the slideshow on the full screen?
I can do that, absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
There we go. Okay. So that's the context of which in what we are looking at, and while perhaps some of that is still true, we have sort of made the dais had an incredible body of knowledge which was passed down from generation to generation with the hands skills, and many of them have worked in communities for their entire lifetime and have an excellent maternal fetal outcome. Having said that, India is still a vast different country. It has its rural and the sub-poverty level population, and then you have the entire city and urban population where there is so much of have. So there is this doing too much too soon and too little too late. And in that situation, there is still lots of maternal death. There is lots of infant death. And so the government started to institutionalize it. But in a global term, if we look at it, we also see that midwives over the world have evolved in different ways. In the US, it has completely gone, it went completely down where it became medicalized, which is how our system has become. And in the UK and other, other European countries, midwifery was taken on as a skilled, educated, it was like a medically educated woman with all the traditional skills of a midwife. And so if I go forward, the age in as coming back to India, the ageless wisdom has been passed down from generations, from ancient times. But in just a century, so if you look at the global population again, in about 100 years, it's only been the last 100 years that birth has gone from this to this. And I think that it's remarkable that we see how much of this has happened and how swiftly it has happened, where women have been suddenly told not to believe your body, that it cannot give birth, you need a doctor, you need somebody else to do something to you in order to bring your baby out. And the woman has innately lost confidence in her body. And so the hospitals and doctors are showed to be the only persons who can deliver the baby. Media doesn't do anything great either. All the time, what you see in media is a woman screaming. There is two extremes. You see women screaming and saying, oh my God, I can't take this." And there is a stretcher, and the woman goes in to the doctor. There is a closed OT door. The doctor comes out, and in some of our over dramatic Indian movies, says that I can either save only the mom or the baby, right? And then you have to make a decision and everyone's crying, or they come out with a baby that's to be handed over to somebody else. Or in the popular culture, it sees the woman screaming and swearing at her husband, saying, "I'm going to never do this again," and then suddenly she gives birth. Or in even another popular culture, we see women saying that, "Honey, my water broke. It's time to have a baby." And literally none of that represents a regular actual birth happening on a timeline, which is set by the woman's own body and their own baby. So what causes all this? It's an atmosphere of fear. And again, I can go on to this on a tangent and talk about a long time about how family and social cultures in India is giving rise to enormous amount of pressure on the woman who is giving birth. Families restricting her. She does not have the ability to even choose a care provider. I would pause for a minute to ask you to think how many women in your community actually have the ability to say, "I want to give birth with somebody else." Who decides? One, convenience decides it because they think birth is an emergency. So they want to choose the hospital which is closest to the house. कुछ हो गया तो क्या करेंगे? Let's just take her and go to the next door hospital without understanding what is the role of the care provider, how does that hospital treat a woman, how many cesareans they have, and we put this doctor on a pedestal ke aap to bhagwan ke niche ho, like you decide what you want to do, right? And therefore all this has snowballed into this effect where now the entire community is saying, "Oh my God, birth is a medical event," right? And so interventions are very much accepted. The first thing when you ask an average woman when she goes into the hospital, she says, "Kya hua? Drip chada gaya." That's all it says. We got a drip, right? And so all this has become the new normal now, so that women don't even think that I can do this even without anybody. I might have a little bit of better experience having someone with me who supports me, but I can actually do it. So the other component of all this is the rise of the cesarean, right? So if you look at overall cesarean rates in India, they are rising remarkably. There are different statistics showing different things. Overall in the country, when you go to see, it is somewhere close to 28-30%, but that's not taking into account because we don't have a good reporting system as well. In most countries abroad, they have to report cesareans. Every hospital has to report a cesarean rate every month, every year, and there is committees which say why these cesareans are increasing. Here we don't have to. So within the capacity of whoever wants to report, we have these statistics. And it's not taking into account private hospitals who don't have to report at all. So Telangana at the moment has one of the highest cesarean rates in the whole world. We have about a 75 to 80% C-section rate, especially in private sectors. Some hospitals have a 90% cesarean rate. COVID has made things terribly worse. Most women are being told, and I know anecdotally in Hyderabad, I know what is happening. Most women are being told, unless you're a second time mom in full active labor, 6, 7 centimeters dilated, I'm not going to even allow you a chance of labor. You're going to get booked in, you're going to go for a C-section. So it's terrible violation of human rights that my body, which made my baby, is not even allowed to have a small component in saying, doctor, but why? And so many women tell me, I worked hard till the last day. I did antenatal exercises. I did squatting. I did this. I did that. And still I landed up with a cesarean section, right? And overall, we know that the last data that comes out has told us that India has doubled whatever average the world has increased in cesarean sections. India has doubled that average. So we should all be worried as care providers, as women, as a society, that why are we getting cut up so often, right? So I think that's super important to kind of keep in mind as we go along. I already talked about the nature of the problem, superstitions, and even when a woman goes to the doctor's hospital and asks, I Google, this is what I was told. Like somebody says, you have a low fluid level. The woman goes and says, but I have an XYZ fluid level and I looked at it. Where did you look at it? Well, I Googled the information. They say, well, you are Dr. Google or what? I have had 10 years of experience. Why do you question me? So I think the idea is that the woman who is actually the Janani, the center of the universe, the center of the life-giving force and the force that brings the baby out, is put at the very bottom end saying, what do you know? I know. What do you know? And over again, we see this almost minimizing the woman's role in her own birth process. Coming back to what does the World Health Organization say? It does recommend caseload midwifery as being the safest model of care available to all mothers, antenatal, intra, and postpartum. And their guidelines say very clearly that when a cesarean section rate in any population, anywhere in the world, exceeds more than 10 to 15%, the risks start to outweigh the benefits. So the risk of a cesarean section now starts to outweigh the benefit of a cesarean section once it crosses the 15% mark. And now we are talking about 90% cesarean rates in some hospitals. So you have to draw your, conclusions about, are we doing more harm to this mother-baby dyad than good, right? So I want to talk 2 minutes about the sanctum and then we will go right on into Lamaze. So what we have done at the sanctum is we have literally pioneered a paradigm shift in which we have had autonomous midwife-led, midwife-owned birth center offering optimal, respectful, safe care to the mother, and then tied it along with the obstetric model, which means we have an operating theater in-house, we have a level 1 NICU in-house. So we have the ability to take care of medical emergencies. One of the reasons why I thought it was super important right from day one was because when a mom needs a C-section for an actual need, then she should not feel, oh my God, now I'm transported out to somebody else. My own team who I knew for 9 months now, I don't have access to, and I have to, give birth with complete strangers. So it made sense for us to have this, the infrastructure co-located inside our center, and the experts, whether it's the gynecologist, whether it's the anesthetist, whether it's physicians, we have built a community of care providers who then come to our center and offer the woman the same care that she would if she was in a tertiary care hospital. There are, of course, certain things which we don't do, very, very preterm twins. There are medical conditions which will warrant that they are in a multi-specialty hospital, and those we will obviously not see. But for the vast majority of low-risk women who then start to have either gestational diabetes or hypertension, twins, we do twins because we know for sure that twins is a variation of normal delivery. We have done breech babies. So, and we have also been able to do some of the highest levels of VBAC in the country. VBAC is vaginal birth after cesarean section, for those of you who don't have an idea about what that term means. And typically, we are told that once a cesarean, it's always a cesarean section. And that is far best from the truth. And we will look at this our rates over here. We have a 10% C-section rate from the beginning of the birth center. In 2020, despite the pandemic, we have our cesarean section rates are at 7.5%. So that means 92.5% women know how to give birth normally, and they still are continuing to do that. And it's pretty remarkable because we are also dealing with some of these higher risk women, and still our cesarean section rates are, in the 7.5% range. If you look at the average healthy woman without any complications, her C-section rate is clearly about 4 to 5%. It doesn't go beyond that. Medical inductions, when a woman has to get induced and she has to get, whether it's by a gel or whether it's by a vaginal tablet or whether it's by a drip or an injection, those inductions are at 5%. Epidurals, we have had eight epidurals in the last 1,300 births. So that's 0.8%. Women don't need epidurals if they are educated about the process of birth and good birth support is offered. Vacuum delivery, 5.5%, 5 out of the last 1,300 births. Forceps delivery, 0.2%. Premature births are less than 1%. So the antenatal quality of care does make a difference. Our episiotomy rates, normally when a woman goes to have a normal delivery, she is told that, especially if she's a first-time mom, that there is no way that she will not have an episiotomy and stitches. Our episiotomy rates are at 6%. Breastfeeding rates, how many women tell, oh, I'm doodh nahi aaya, I could not breastfeed my baby, I had a C-section, until third day my milk didn't come in, and then, the baby was given the bottle, and then the whole breastfeeding thing went down the drain. So discharge rates at 6 weeks and postpartum is almost at 100%. We have probably 99.5%. We've had a couple of challenging cases this past year, but that's about it. And then our VBAC success rates are 90%. So that's pretty remarkable. So even after a first C-section, we've had a 90% vaginal birth success rate. So a quick snapshot of our birth center. It doesn't look like a hospital. It does look like home. And this is where women give birth. So I think we have to turn the paradigms of known, facts. It's not a hotel. We are not trying. Again, we look at all these high-end hospitals which have made like super hotel suites and birthing rooms, and there is music, and there is 3 different kinds of chocolate cake that is offered to them. But you are not checking into a hotel. If you wanted to do that, you would go to a hotel. You're checking in to come to give birth and go home, and you want an atmosphere that is closest to home. It's calm, it's peaceful, there is very low light, and generally you would get the feel of being in your grandmom's home or in your own bedroom, and that's what helps to give birth with confidence and with peace. So so I kind of wanted to give a small introduction of what we do, but now we get to the meat of what we are going to talk about, which is Lamaze and how it helps. Because it's not just about lowering intervention and cesarean rates. This is the most important thing that I will tell you today, because many times from what you read, from what you hear, from what you understand, you think that Lamaze is about helping women have a normal delivery. And that is not the aim of Lamaze. It can be, and definitely Lamaze believes in as a philosophy that women can have a good natural birth under most circumstances. So we will come to that in a minute. But one of the biggest aspects of Lamaze is to help the woman seek optimal, respectful, and safe care. And that's the crux. If we are able to impart to the woman the confidence that you can have good quality care, and by having good quality of care, you will emerge out much more confident and feeling good about your birth. That's what Lamaze is all about. So I want to take you back a moment and introspect as care providers, as physical therapists. Again, some of you may have seen this, some of you may have not. You might have had some OBGYN postings, even if you have done your, like your bachelor's. Those of you who have done your master's may have had more. But in those postings, or if you have had your own birth, or if you have accompanied someone to birth, or if you have just heard about it, think about all these factors that and make a mental checklist as to how many things like this did you see. No dignity and privacy. So even if you're in the labor room or the adjacent, your observation room before you go into the labor room, people walk in, walk out. There is literally no knocking. Even if there is knocking, there is 2, 3 people that come in. If there are students, the doctor brings in all the students and does not really ask the mom, is it okay for me to bring these students in? And this is not just about physios, I'm talking about the medical system in general now. Many places still practice pubic shaving and enema, and I hear these stories from women day in and day out. It has become less. That's the good news. Government has taken many, like steps towards humanizing childbirth. There is Lakshya programs, there is Daksha programs, and those programs are saying that pubic shaving and enema are no longer needed. Some of you might have still experienced it or seen it. But why would a woman in labor be told to lie down, spread her legs, and a shaving and enema being given? Not for her. It is for the doctor's benefit that all that is being done. Internal exams. Internal exams are so pervasive, where the hand is put inside and someone says you're this centimeter dilated or you're not dilated and you have to go for a cesarean or whatever it is that might be. And if you are trying for a normal delivery, it happens every few hours. Somebody comes in, checks you, and says, "This is the progress. I need to do this. I need to do that." And it's really hard for the woman to. She has to take it because she knows that there is no other way out, and she feels that if I don't do it, my baby might be in danger. What choice does she have? And as soon as you put it inside, you do this thing, and she's like holding her eyes tight, her legs tight, and the doctor is saying, or any other, the student or the registrar is saying, or sometimes the nurse, "Amma, if you don't do this, then how do you expect to have a baby?" Again, in her mind, she's become this much in her own birth instead of being that much in her own birth. Then someone shames her, saying that if you could spread your legs for getting, making a baby, why can't you spread your legs for having a baby? These are all real stories. And it makes my blood boil in some ways, and it makes me feel tearful in some ways, because as a woman with a lived-in experience of her body, those are not required things. And seeing women give birth over and over again, we know that it's not needed. The cervix does not tell us where this woman is going to be where she was 2 minutes before and where she is going to be 2 hours from now. So we have made this whole thing into a spectacle, which again makes the family believe that the doctor is the only one who has control over this birth process. And many women, when they're trying for a second birth, will come and tell me that, "Ma'am, the pain of the internal exam was more than the pain of the labor itself." And we should never be having that, right? So IVs are routine, induction and augmentation. They say, आपको थोड़ा सा energy आ जाएगा, I'll put this drip in, right? But then, without telling her, medication goes into the drip, either to make her sedated, either to make her sleepy, or to increase her contractions, and none of this is done with informed consent. It takes 2 minutes for me to say, okay, let's do this internal exam quietly, peacefully. You can stop me whenever you want. Now, please get dressed. Now, you and I can sit face to face and have a conversation about what are our options. In a normal progressing labor, we don't need any of that. But when it's a longer labor, we can talk humanly to each other and have that consent from the mom. But if she has never heard this before, and again, we come back to Lamaze in a minute, if she has never heard about all this before, then she's not going to be able to make good choices in labor itself. So that's that. No information, no food and water in most places is not given to her, because they're all saying that, if you have to go for an emergency cesarean, you cannot have a whole belly of food. At the maximum, some water and some light foods are offered if you're in a good facility. In a bad facility, you're withheld. Water is withheld. And a laboring uterus. Uterus is a muscle, right? It's the strongest muscle in our body. It labors the equivalent of running a 51-mile marathon in a first-time mother. And how do we expect her not to be exhausted if we withhold food and water? And then we say maternal exhaustion, take her for a C-section. So everything that we are doing right now, we are doing contrary to physiology of birth, right? Lying on the delivery table for hours. We tell her in the antenatal period, don't lie on your back, but on the table, she's lying on her back in excruciating pain for hours. So that happens using of syrup, fundal pressure, episiotomy, cord clamped, cord cut, baby is taken away from her, put in a warmer, somebody dries the baby up, a baby starts to smell like some coconut oil or Johnson's oil that somebody has asked to clean up the baby, wrapped, nicely given to grandmom. And where is the mother in all this? Who has worked hard for this baby? She says, Khatam ho gaya, chalo torture. Right? And someone else is enjoying the baby. We have to think about this. And what happens to the baby who is there in either someone else's arm or in on a warmer, crying aloud. It's going into distress. And it is saying that this is the only welcome that life is giving me. That I can't trust anybody. I have to fend for myself and I must shut down. Because when we are in distress and when we are in fear, two things happen. One, we either try to run away very quickly, the flight or fright, right? Or we want to shut down and be frozen. And that's what happens to the baby. So what a welcome are we giving to humanity, right? That this is a place which is cold, which does not have its mother's voice, which does not allow for good, safety for me. And when we are calling this normal delivery. How is this normal, right? So that's how the delivery table looks like. Those of you who have seen it, somebody is doing things, somebody is pressing from above, somebody is below, and look at that woman's face. And this is why many women choose to have a cesarean section, because they're saying, "Abba, ye to nahi chahiye mujhe," right? And I don't blame them. So mother-centric care means informed consent, 24/7 labor support, partner and family involved in every aspect of pregnancy, laser focus on diet and exercise throughout pregnancy. And I'll come to this in a minute, because we have lost the olden times where women used to work a lot. Most of you, and even me, I sit a lot, I do my work, I check the women in labor. When the woman's laboring, there's a lot of hard work that happens behind the scenes, but still there is a sedentary nature to most of our lives today, right? So yes, that part which your grandmom used to automatically get by eating good energy food, eating foods off the ground, non-processed foods, and being completely active throughout the day and having 8-9 children is not there anymore. And this is where Lamaze classes become the key component of informed decision making. So what is Lamaze? Is it a technique? Is it antenatal exercises? Is it counseling? If so, who is authorized or licensed to do it? I think this is going to be a huge component of what I talk about at the end of the session today, because if you're doing antenatal and postnatal exercises and the hospital that you're in is calling it Lamaze, I'm sorry, that's not Lamaze. And you're violating lots of ethics when you're doing it. So be aware of what your professional boundaries are and what you're going to be able to do. So this is one. Is it a breathing technique? And do physios teach it routinely? Is it labor support? It may be some of all of this, but it is so much more. So Lamaze was established in 1960 as a not-for-profit organization. Now it is a non-profit organization. And the mission was to advance safe and healthy pregnancy and birth and early parenting. So it takes you through the gamut of pregnancy, labor, childbirth, and early parenting. And there is a philosophy for each of these things. And based on what? Evidence-based education. So that's one of the key tenets. It is respectful, it is evidence-based. So everything that we are saying, none of this is, just someday one of us woke up and said, oh, let's practice it like this. But here is the fun part. We are using enormous amount of research dollars or rupees to prove that natural is better. Like you're using the things to say natural is better, like how would you, just like you're researching to say, well, green vegetables are better than processed cheese. And that's happening as well. It's kind of funny that we are going back to the roots and trying to prove that those roots of the tree are actually in the first place what is needed to give life to the tree, right? At the core of its philosophy is the belief that birth is a transformative event and that every family deserves a safe, healthy, and respectful birth experience. Yeah. So So I want to just take you into a little bit of history. And Megha, if I'm running out of time, you can always talk to me and let me know that I'm running out of time, and I can always cut it down a little bit. Okay. But I just wanted to give a brief bird's eye view of what the history of Lamaze is. So for those of you who want to become interested in this process, you can actually have at least an idea of why you want to do this, right? So one of the things that I often talk about is that there is nothing that comes without a consumer need. So without the women and her family saying this is the reason why we want XYZ practices to be changed, nothing is going to happen. So in the 1920s and 40s, before in the 1900s, all births used to happen at home. We know that, just like there many of the births are happening here today. And then somewhere in the 1920s and to the 1940s, the birth scene started to change. And the medical community sort of convinced the mothers that hospitals are the place to give birth. That is between 30s and 40s. And in between that, there also was a societal change where all these women were saying, why should we have pain while we are giving birth? So from the 30s, 40s, 50s, start like in the mid 50s, all this movement for women's liberation was there. Bra burning was happening. Generally, women were saying that why should I experience pain? In Germany, there was a medication that was started to be used on women, which was called scopolamine, which basically was injected to the mother as soon as she entered the hospital. And that made her, very, very, it made her in La La Land, for lack of a better word. She didn't understand what was going on around her. It made her also a little violent. And so her hands and feet started being tied up tied up to keep her quiet. And that's probably the origin of the syrups and so on and so forth. And then she was because of the medication, she did not have an idea about when to push, how to push. That's when episiotomy started becoming routine, and forceps delivery started coming into play. And all these things eventually happened. The baby was taken away from the mother, probably also the genesis of baby not coming to mom, and maybe the other artificial feeding substitutes happening at that point of time. But this is like the perfect storm of everything happening, which is non-normal, non-natural. And then women coming out of it 5 days later, going home and with a baby in the arm saying, wow, I have a baby. But this medication that was given actually made the woman forget her childbirth completely. So here there is 5 days of total, like something happened, I have a baby, but I don't remember my birth. And that's scary for most of us, I'm pretty sure, right? And so there was this whole community of women who then started questioning and asking that, well, my mom's generation, the grandmom's generation, knew exactly how to give birth. They birthed at home. And now I'm coming out with all these problems and not knowing how my childbirth happened, and I do want something different. So again, the consumer movement started to shift from one end to the other. Meanwhile, Dr. Ferdinand Lamaze, on whose name this Lamaze method is, went to Russia, and there one Dr. Nikolaev was studying and using techniques of abdominal stroking, massages, water, comfort, and just and using all those, and breathing. That's where Lamaze came at it from, and helping women give birth naturally. So Dr. Lamaze, who's a French physician but was practicing in the U.S., came back with that. And then in the same time, Marjorie Carmel, who was a social worker and was having her baby, he helped Marjorie Carmel have her first unmedicated birth using the Lamaze method. And that's how it started being called the Lamaze method. Women have given birth since the beginning of time. So for men and other women to say it's my method seems a little odd to me, but nevertheless, that's how the names have come in. And she wrote a book called Thank You, Dr. Lamaze. That started becoming popular, and Elizabeth Bing, who was a physical therapist, she and Marjorie Carmel got together in the midst of the start of this natural birth movement. And so in 1960s, this organization was formed. It's a mouthful. It was called the American Society for Psychoprophylaxis and Obstetrics, which means if you prepare the woman's mind, psychoprophylaxis, right? and teach her certain things and make her physically ready as well, and utilize that method because it's breath work and distraction and whatever sort of thing, then she would have a normal delivery. So from 1960s, it was a method, it was a breathing technique, and so on. It went until 1990s. At which point some of it definitely helped there, and concurrently many birthing movements came into play. There was ICA that was established, there was Bradley method which was established, which was called a dad coached birth. Again, do women need coaching? This is the question, right? I think as women we have to understand that this is a bodily um, it's a bodily thing that's happening, and we don't need coaching. We may need encouragement. We benefit from another pair of hands with us at our birth, but I don't think coaching is what we need anyway. But that started, lots of organizations came into play. Childbirth education classes were becoming more and more common. But yet, what was being seen over a period of time, that cesarean sections, which were, say, about, maybe like 3 to 4% in those 1960s, steadily were increasing to 20%, 25%, and in the middle of 1990s, it was like 23% or something like that. 1 out of 5 women were giving birth by cesarean section. So in 1993, Lamaze became actually a philosophy. Instead of saying it's a method and a technique and breathing, which is still what many of you know it as, it became a philosophy of giving birth. And then the 6 healthy birth practices became the cornerstone of empowering women and their families to understand about what are their birth choices and how they can have an optimal and safe, healthy birth. So at the core of Lamaze's education, they are the practices that are based on most current medical evidence available. So don't get this wrong. This is something that's properly evidence-based. They can help reduce the use of unnecessary interventions and overall improve outcomes for mothers and babies. It helps the women to become confident. It helps them to trust their innate ability to give birth, and it helps them make, most importantly, if I were asked as a Lamaze educator, what is the gift that I give the woman? I tell them that my gift to you through these classes is that the fact that you can confidently make good informed decisions about your pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, and postpartum journey. And evidence-based education can be one of the biggest pathways to have an empowered and safe, healthy birth. So these are the 6 healthy birth practices that it's based on. Let labor begin on its own. We're going to explore it short. These are classes which I take for hours and days, so I can't condense it for you to understand everything, but I'm going to try and parse out the smaller things so that at least the broader things, so that you get some understanding about it. So let labor begin on its own. Walk, change, and move positions in labor. Ensure that you get continuous labor support. Avoid unnecessary interventions. When you're pushing, use upright positions, because gravity and even your own body help you to move in a way that helps the baby down the birth canal, and then keep mother and baby together. So if you use, on the face of it, it seems common sense, right? Like, yeah, you would want labor to begin on its own. Did you take 50 people's help to conceive? Sometimes, yes, like if you have had assisted reproduction, all of that. But otherwise, you were in the privacy of your room to conceive. You should allow labor to begin on its own. You should be walking, moving, and changing positions. When you have, like a cut or a burn, you don't just keep it there and say, let this burn as much as I can. So all these make actually common sense, but when it's put together as a practice, it makes a very good basis for now helping the woman and her family understand what are some of the things that they need to advocate for themselves when they go to the hospital. So education becomes the key. We have tons of in fact, one of the things that I say to the people who come to birth with me at the birth center, we follow all these birth practices. We don't do unnecessary interventions. We routinely give 24/7 labor support. We don't, push women to have medicated birth. You saw our numbers, right? Even so, I tell them that I will not help you birth your child unless you go through classes. That's how important it is. Because it's different when you come for a consultation and we have half an hour consultation. So don't get me wrong, we talk about a lot of things over there. I help them with a lot of things in the consultation as well. But there you're specifically talking about your body, your baby, what's happening in those few minutes, and what to expect in the next few days or months before your next checkup. When you go to a class, and if you're invested in it, mind and body, and when it's for 3 hours once a week and it goes across many weeks like that, you have time to absorb, you have time to listen, you have time to reflect on what you learned, you have time to sort of understand what your body needs, you have time to form a partnership with your family, you have time to really look for whether your care provider is working with these evidence-based practices. And most importantly, you have a lovely way to expand your view of birth, which until then you have thought of as painful, 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 labor pain, labor pain. I don't know how I'm going to do it. How many women are fearful just because of the pain? And you know what is the best thing that parents tell me when they finish their classes? Many of them will say, I went in with so much questions. Now I feel very clear and calm. I feel like I can take my labor journey on. And then one of the most common threads of comments is that the classes were a game changer. That's how important education, childbirth education is. We do prenatal yoga, starting to a lot of movement throughout pregnancy. Again, most doctors, many doctors and hospitals will say, no, 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 be careful, first trimester, be on bed rest. Huh? In a normal, healthy, low-risk woman, why do we need to be on bed rest? As physios, the more you are on the bed, what happens to your body? Wasting, muscle wasting, lots of pain. Well, some people might think, wow, I wish I could have bed rest, but after 4 hours, your body is breaking, like it feels like it's breaking bones, right? So no, you don't need to be on bed rest unless there is an extraordinary medical condition. So moving throughout the pregnancy from first trimester yoga and then going on to prenatal aerobics. And I love teaching prenatal aerobics. These are women at 36, 37, 38, 41 weeks moving and doing jumping jacks. And it's pretty cool to see what your body is capable of. And on the right side is this woman who is about 39 weeks and 40 weeks and few days, almost into a 41st week. She's a yogini by profession anyway, but she's in this Raja Ravi Verma type costume and, doing that with a full pregnancy. Look at her. That's an empowered woman who says, I know what my body's capacities are, and why will she not have a good birth experience, right? So that's that. I don't know what happened to this, but okay, I think I'm going to leave that because it's like it's talking about the hormonal symphony of labor. I think there is a little bit of mixed match in this this thing. I thought I had included the Lama's first healthy birth practice, but I'll talk to you about it in a minute. Okay, why that other slide over there, I'm not going to share it because it doesn't look great, but the first slide over there was actually talking about what is the importance of labor to start on its own, right? And I think the most important thing that we can look at is for us to say who starts the process of labor. It's the baby or the mother, right? And it can be a bit of both. And I don't think any amount of research is going to give us a full answer because there is a beautiful sanctity to this human body. And though we can try to do so much research, at the end of the day, I think it's good to leave a little bit unknown that it's between the creator and you and the baby. But that being said, what we know so far is when the baby is fully ready, especially when its lungs are fully ready. As physios, again, surfactant is puts the lungs, right? And that's what, when the baby comes out, allows for the fluid to get absorbed because of the osmolarity and pressures there, and allows the lung to fill up with air, right? So when the baby is actually ready, it has there's like, again, a perfect amount of surfactant in the body, which sends a tiny protein signal to the mother saying that I'm ready to be born and I'm ready to breathe outside. That's how perfect nature is. That's on the baby side. On the mom's side, there are all these cytokines and inflammatory responses coming in to the placenta, which is saying, yep, ready to labor. Prostaglandins are coming in, which are softening the cervix. So this symphony of hormones that are happening inside the mom and having this mother-baby dyad be ready for the process of labor and birth. And even a small interference in that causes cascades of interventions to happen, which have long-lasting effects not only on the nature of the labor and birth, but throughout their lifetime as well. So that's one. So why would you not want the baby to choose his or her own birthday when they are fully ready to be outside? Is the womb a rental space where you say, okay, chalo, rent khatam ho gaya, aaj baby ko bahar bhej denge? Doesn't make sense. Is the baby sitting with a calendar inside saying, hello, okay, today is August 20th, I need to pop out? If you put a batch of microwave popcorn inside your microwave, some will pop early, a majority will pop at the same time, some will pop late, right? Michelle O'Donnell talks about an apple orchard. You wouldn't enter an apple orchard and pick all the apples there just because you are there. Some will be ripe and ready, some will be ripening later. So even in the context of all of this, let the body starting labor avoid a lot of these cascades of intervention. And one more thing, what happens in the last 4 weeks or 6 weeks of pregnancy? Super important to understand, right? So you have body weight increasing, all the fat that is required for a thermal regulation in the body, for better maintenance of bodily function, so that the baby does not, a preterm baby has much higher risk of dying in those first few weeks post-birth, not to mention a enormous number of other problems that can happen. But that allows for better brown fat to get established, allows for better thermal regulation. The end of pregnancy, the baby gains about 150 to 200 grams per week in those last few weeks of pregnancy. Why would you want a skeletal looking baby instead of a good weight baby who is mature? Then breath, we already talked about, the body, the breath, and the brain. What is happening to the brain? In those last few weeks, enormous amount of neuronal connections are being established. This is a 35-week brain, not kidding. That is a 39-week brain. So 1/3 every week, the brain is increasing in volume by about 15 ml. So like 60 ml of brain growth is happening in volume. And all of you who physios who work with neurological patients know how important it is to have those additional brain cells for redundancy, so that you can actually, if something goes wrong, that those redundant cells come into play. Why would you want the baby at birth to not have that redundancy happening that nature is provided for, right? And this much is the amount of brain cells that's happening. So language and cognition, and they did research on children who were born near term. We say 37 weeks, baby to full term ho gaya hai, abhi to khali weight gain hoga. Why don't we just take this baby out? As if the only purpose of this thing was to come to 37 weeks by some magical number to give birth. And then they looked at these babies who were born early term. We call them not preterm anymore, but near term or early term. And they looked at babies who were born by themselves at 40, 41, 42 weeks. By the way, 40 to 42 weeks is full term now. This nomenclature has changed. 40 to 42 weeks. Yes, you heard it. Only after 42 weeks it's called post term, right? So in those days, the brain architecture itself is becoming so good that when you examine children at 4 years of age who were born near term and who are, so just, labor starting on its own has such good effects. Going on to the second healthy birth practice, freedom of movement in labor. Freedom of movement allows for the pelvis. You know that in the pelvis, there is relaxin hormones that come in towards from the 5th month on, but it comes in the powers, and the maternal pelvis, which is the third part. And all three have to be in sync in order to let this baby down and out, right? And the baby's head is soft. It can mold itself through the birth canal and come out. And mom's body is mobile. So all these are the things that are helping. If you had, say, a dinosaur-like baby, or if you had a head like mine, and a body like mine who is just sitting and not moving, potentially no birth would happen, right? So squatting actually opens the pelvic diameter by up to 30% in labor. How cool is that? Plus, when you talk about pain, that's the other component of it, right? I briefly spoke about it earlier, but when you talk about brain, this is not a fracture pain or a burn pain, which is there constantly. It comes and goes. And when it goes, you walk, you move around, you shake a little bit, and that's the way you manage the pain. Pain is protective to your body, right? If it were not protective, if you stubbed your toe against the door, you would keep your toe there and go, ah. Or you would take the toe off and put ice on it and do something, right? So pain is protective. It tells you how to move, when to move. And that protective nature of the pain allows the labor to progress in a healthy and safe manner and allows the woman to feel in charge of her body instead of lying on a table where somebody is telling things what to do, putting the hand in, keeping her legs in stirrups, and just making that pain 100 times worse. That's where all these comparisons come in. That pain is just like breaking 1,000 bones. No, it is not. It comes for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and the best part of it is that it is intermittent. That's why we have 7 billion people on this earth, because if it were that kind of pain which was not bearable, no baby would be born, right? And if it was only cesarean sections, let me tell you, we would have all become extinct. Labor support is so important. So this is your Healthy Birth Practice 3. 24/7 labor support is known to decrease cesarean rates by 30% and interventions by 40%. And there's the dad, there's the grandmom, she's being supported. This mother on the right gave birth with me twice, and she had back labor, which means her back splits every single point, every contraction, it's only in her back. And she needed so much support. Her husband holding her hands, encouraging, one of our nurses who's cross-trained to provide labor support, and she needed her buttocks and her hips squeezed in a certain way to be able to tolerate the pain, and she had 2 beautiful natural births. Labor support with love. That's worth its weight in gold. Now, how many of you can imagine labor like this? And if we cannot, what are we doing with mothers and babies? Look at that husband and wife on the right. I'm going to go back to that in a minute. But that's a couple who is in love, who's sharing that process of labor and birth, and she's in good, strong, active labor. None of these pictures are like early labor, women doing, when they get admitted to the birth center, they are in every 3 minutes, every 5 minutes contractions. But in between the contractions, she's getting the support that she needs, with the care that she needs, with the warmth that she needs, and with the oxytocin that she needs, which is the love hormone, which has helped you conceive, which has helped start the process of labor, which is so needed to help progress labor, which is so needed for the birth of the baby, comes in huge amounts for expelling the placenta, and comes in huge amounts to start that first hormonal shift into prolactin, which causes the milk to come in. So in every step of the way, this woman on the right is sitting on the toilet seat. Her mom's watching, her husband's there, and she had a beautiful water birth. She had a second baby with me too after that. Sometimes it needs a lot of support. This mom also had both her babies with me. She carries large babies. Her first baby was 4.2 kgs and the second baby was 3.9 kgs or something like that. She carries large babies. And she was struggling through that first labor. We were using a shawl, which is called the Mexican shawl, which is called the rebozo, but any shawl works actually, helping the baby enter into the pelvis. There is a nurse, there is Kiran, who is one of my midwives. And until then, the husband was very, very scared and was standing at one end of the room. I was there in the room that day, and I went and hugged her and I said, you can do this. And then I said to the husband, why don't you come and do this? And at the end of all of this, she birthed a baby and she said to me, ma'am, that humble hug, it changed everything that day. So hugging and supporting is not only giving the oxytocin to the mother when she needs it, but it is also allowing other good things to happen to help with labor progress. That's the value of emotional support. This mom was panicking. So every contraction she would panic, and I focused her and I was like, come on, you and I can do this together. Eye to eye, looking at together, finishing the contraction. She goes back with her husband, sits quietly, takes the in-between rest, comes back, and we do it all over again. And that's the focus, and that's the support that you need, that emotionally saying, you can do this. You are doing this. We are doing this together. You are safe. Your baby is safe. This is going to happen. And why are you doing this? You're doing this because you want to see the baby in your arms, right? And that's a beautiful, peaceful labor. Again, imagine, can you see this? These are our women giving birth, and this woman is just about getting ready to push. She's inside the tub, her husband is with her, and she's closing her eyes and she's taking her contractions. Midwifery skills, super important. Again, the movement that we talked about, this woman was having a VBAC, a vaginal birth after a previous C-section, and her baby was 4.3 kgs when it was born. Long labor towards the end, and she's walking, talking, moving, but towards the end, we actually were squatting and moving during the contraction, duck walking as we call it, to help the women, to let the baby descend into the birth canal. Upright positions, your fifth healthy birth practice, it kind of ties into your second, because upright positions, obviously the gravity is there. Think about a ketchup bottle and trying to squeeze the ketchup bottle horizontal versus vertical. Makes sense, right? And so there are two ends of it. Different women can experience labor differently. She is pushing using a small stool and pushing down. This woman on the right is also pushing using a sari to hang on to with her aunt, who was her designated labor support person for her, and she's smiling. So women can experience it in different ways, but in both cases, that upright position is allowing for the baby to descend. And then we come to this, right? We say we can't give birth without cutting. We can't give birth without, and women are body shamed too. You're a larger woman, like this woman is actually larger. And before I do anything else, please, I also want to tell you, please don't take screenshots. Please don't take any of this. And please, the IAP conference cell, please ensure that this is not, except for like licensed people, don't use it anywhere else, because these people have actually given me permission to, utilize these images. But yeah, please ensure that you are not taking screenshots and publishing it on social media. I would not want that at all. Okay, that being said, so this woman's a larger woman, right? And we say, oh, if you're so and so beyond certain kg, you can't give weight. A thin woman can't give weight. We have had 35 kg women give birth. We have had 125 kg women give birth. So birth can happen provided it is safe and it is monitored and it is supported. But in this particular thing, you're seeing how the perineum is getting stretched to give birth. And so it's not an emergency. No one needs to tell what to do. And you're on the table with the legs in the stirrups, people holding you down and say, push, take a deep breath in, don't make noise, go. And everyone is holding the breath. I hold my breath too when somebody is saying that thing. Come on, maybe we should all hold collectively our breath and push to have this baby out, right? It doesn't make sense. If you have this worst constipated bowel movement of your life and you were in the bathroom, you had no privacy, 10 people surrounded you, and everyone said, come on, you can do this. I'm sorry, I'm like giving you a bad, like sort of a weird example here, but your body will not know what to do it. Privacy is not there. You need to adjust your position. Sometimes it may mean not having that motion at that time, getting up and moving, and then coming back, and at another point of time, drinking a lot of water. We all know how our gastric system feels like. We don't need 100 people tell us how to do it. It's similar with this as well.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt. We need to go a little fast.
Yeah, how much? I'm almost done anyway. How much time do I have? Like within 10 minutes, if we end, is that okay? Or 5 minutes?
Should be okay, ma'am. 5-7 minutes should be
okay. Okay, fine. All right. So this can be birth without pushing. And that's ultimately what is needed, right? The mother-baby contact and the moment of birth is what is needed. And when it happens, give me 1 minute. Yeah. Sorry. And look at what happens to the mother when she gives birth like that. We come back into those healthy birth practices, mom, baby together. She's saying, I did it, right? And that hormonal high of endorphin is there with her for a lifetime. Look at that. That's a pretty recent birth that happened. And she's the one who is in charge. No one else is. There is no hands, no nothing. She's the one who is in charge, right? And no separation of mother and baby means it's love at first sight. It is those hormones that empower, breastfeeding as well. And that connection, that bonding lasts a lifetime. Nature has made it like this so that they understand that this is the connection of mom baby which lasts a lifetime. And an alert mom equals alert baby. That's a baby at birth. Within a few minutes, opening, looking at its mother. And it's beyond the scope of this presentation to talk about, delayed cord clamping. But I did want to put that image out there that we don't need to rush things, that the placenta can come out, and look at that mother-baby bonding also within few minutes of birth. Mom, baby, eye to eye, skin to skin, no one else within 3 feet of them, and it's their moment of pause to experience. Breastfeeding happens naturally. So again, coming back to that 6 healthy birth practice, no separation of mother and baby, which means better, breastfeeding. And that love hormone is that circle of love lasts a lifetime. A lot of people give birth in water. We use 90% of our mothers, have pain relief in water, and around 40% have a water birth. And I want you to watch this for the next 1 minute. She's just ready to push her baby out. And she reaches and touches her baby's head. And she smiles. Look at that baby. So, what does it tell us? These are not things to just wow you. These are to say that this is how a woman should give birth. Would a woman want this? Or a mother want that? And so what facilitates it? No fear in the birth room, calm environment, letting the mother lead, supporting her, avoiding invasive procedures, and the midwifery care and the Lamaze 6 healthy birth practices. So what did we learn about Lamaze today? It's not a technique, it's a philosophy which enables an empowered birth experience. I put this here because many people say that if you do this squat, climb this stairs, breathe like this, I want to teach you breathing. Why should you teach anybody breathing? Yes, it can form a beautiful way to calm your body down. I think breath work is very important, but in the right context, it gives you the ability to ensure that you have good focus, internal focus. It ensures that you're calming down and giving good oxygen to your body and the baby. But if you say, I do hee hoo hoo breathing and I have a good birth experience, you cannot without finding a good, healthy care provider who respects your wishes and follows healthy birth practices. The 6 healthy birth practices are common sense, I told you this before, yet rooted in the most current medical evidence enabling a safe and healthy birth outcome. And this is the key. Independent Lamaze childbirth educators can make an enormous difference because you're giving good, solid evidence-based knowledge. You're making it really kind of relevant to that mom and that family, helping her make her best choices, sort of being a background advocate for her, but allowing her to make her own advocacy to have a great birth, pregnancy, and parenting journey. This is where we are at. On the web, on Facebook, we have a fantastic community. We are on Instagram at Sanctum Birth Centers. And if you want to attend any of our workshops and become Lamaze certified, you can write to us at healthy-mother.com. Thank you for listening patiently. And certainly, I hope that it has been at least somewhat helpful in broadening your outlook about what you as physios can do and what really Lamaze is and how you can hopefully become, a more informed birth practitioner if that's what you choose to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, we shall take question answers now. Pallavi Zade.
Hello.
Yes, Pallavi, we can hear you.
Ma'am, thank you so much. You just, there's no words for your presentation, ma'am. You have changed my definition of normal labor. I have my own experience of it and it's very scary. And you just changed the definition, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, shall I move with the question, sir?
Yeah.
Is the hypnobirthing as same as Lamaze?
No, hypnobirthing is not the same as Lamaze. So basically, you have tools, right? So there is like if you're a carpenter, you carry your tool bag. So there are all these tools to help a woman give birth and give birth with confidence. Hypnobirthing can be one of those tools. For some women, it works perfectly because basically through the period that you have gone through the classes, through the period that you have gone through your own self sort of meditation into and using the affirmations that hypnobirthing offers, using all the visualizations that it offers. Basically, you're telling your mind and body that this is okay, this is a surge, it's okay to deal with this in this manner, it will come and go, and it's a beautiful tool. Okay, but if it is the only tool, sometimes I find that if when in labor, if your pain is not what you thought it would be, then it actually becomes very hard for the woman to manage labor. So I would say it's another philosophy, another way to give birth, and absolutely good if you're having it, but it should be one of the tools in your tool bag. And as educators, you can choose to become hypnobirthing practitioners, you can become childbirth educators with a different organization, you can become Lamaze certified. And I just want to say this, that Lamaze certification is recognized in all the countries, all over the world, and it is one of the most stringent sort of ways in which you can actually certify to become a childbirth educator. So yeah, it's two different things altogether.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, can primary above 35 years of age have a normal delivery or without any risk factor?
Loaded question. So if she has any no risk factors, then absolutely yes. What we are seeing actually is that women are birthing later and later in their lives. When I started in the birth center about 12 years ago, we used to see a lot of women having birth between 24, 25 years of age, then a lot of women between 28, 29. Now what we are seeing is there are a few with 24, 25, 26. Vast majority of our Indian women are birthing, at least in our birth center, between 29 to 31. Then there are some who are birthing between 32 to 35. And after 35 to 39, there are fewer. But yes, a first-time mom can absolutely have a normal delivery without any intervention if she is otherwise healthy and low risk. We had a very recent birth of a mom who was 42 years old, first-time mother, and absolutely beautiful water birth. But she worked for it. She prepared for it. That's the key.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, what about giving the position to change the bridge delivery or to change to get the baby's head in optimal head down position?
Yeah.
How
So
Lamaze is helpful for it?
Lamaze doesn't help for that. See, again, we have to think about it in terms of what is the scope of the Lamaze educator. Lamaze educator is providing knowledge and skills. So while we talk about comfort positions, we talk about certain exercises that can help to, alleviate pain and also make you more active and healthy in pregnancy. Uh, while we do talk a little bit about things that can help to turn a breech baby, there is not like a whole lot of talk or skills, hands-on skills that happen during the course of the Lamaze program to make a Lamaze childbirth educator an expert in helping her with that. Having said that, there are lots of websites. There is actually one website which is called Spinning Baby, which puts out tons of information. And there is a for parent section as well. There is one for other educators and other professionals who want to become involved with the Spinning Babies program. But as an educator, what you can do is to say, I can give you this link. Go do, look at that link, try to do some of those positions that they're talking about, and then, see if the baby will turn. Sometimes it does. And if the only thing is that as an educator, if you start getting involved in these things, suppose something goes wrong, who takes the responsibility for that? This has always got to be the question at the back of any childbirth educator, that I have to work within my scope of practice and not beyond that, right? But Spinning Babies gives you a very good, like a set of things that a pregnant woman and a partner can do to help the baby turn, and I would utilize
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, how can we choose what to do? Kapha, hypnobirthing, Lamaze?
Wide range, right? I think again, it's the same question. It's about what you want. I believe that every organization has its strengths and has its weaknesses. I believe that every organization will teach you something. I believe that there is the origins and the sort of mindset is the same, that we should help the women have good birth experiences and a good natural birth experience as far as it is possible. But I think you have to do your own due diligence as to what it is. Like I said, hypnobirthing is one aspect, right? Kappa also has the similar philosophies, but you have to then look at it. Just like I would say to a woman that go ask your questions of your care provider. Ask what is the philosophy. Ask what is the cesarean rate. Ask what will happen when your due date comes and goes. I would ask the organization. I can talk about my organization. I know exactly what it is, but I can't talk for other people. So I would ask the people to go ask the people who are, heading up that organization or who are the facilitators of that workshop to say, why should I choose Kappa? I can tell you why you should choose Lamaze, but I would not be able to tell you why you should choose Kappa. Yeah, it makes sense.
Does the gestational diabetes is a contraindication for normal delivery?
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. I think there is lots of things that happen behind the scenes. I think people are worried about, a macrosomic baby, which is a big weight baby, and so on and so forth. But it is not in itself a contraindication. I think one has to work with the care providers. The mother has to work with diet, exercise, sometimes even insulin. And then if the practices are still rooted in healthy birth practices, she can give birth normally, unless you're having a 5 kg baby, and you will know that if you're having a 5 kg baby.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, that's all for the question answers. Over to you, Dr. Sonal Bhagat.
Hello. Uh, Hello. Thanking is an expression of gratitude. I'm so honored to express my gratitude with a word of thanks for this illuminating webinar. Myself, Dr. Sonal Bhagat, on behalf of IIPWC Nagpur District team and entire family of IIPWC, extend my sincere thanks to one and all. First and foremost, I would like to thank our dynamic speaker, Dr. Vijay Krishnan ma'am, for her presence. She withdrew her valuable time for us from her busy schedule. Her style of explanation of the topic was exemplary, and it made the topic more interesting. Thank you so much, ma'am. I wish to express my gratitude to our national head, Dr. Sanjeev Jha sir, and Dr. Ruchi Varshney ma'am, and zonal head, Dr. Pooja ma'am, for providing encouragement and support to organize this event. Event like this cannot happen overnight. The wheels start rolling weeks ago. It requires planning and dedication. Yes, we are fortunate enough to be backed up by a team of gems with our pillars, our state coordinators, our biggest support, Dr. Suvarna Ganvir ma'am and Dr. Snehal ma'am as a joint coordinator. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your support. I extend my thanks to all our state sub-coordinators, Dr. Uttara ma'am, Dr. Nirali ma'am, and Dr. Priya ma'am for their cooperation in the organization of this webinar. I also thank the IIP technical team. Without their support, the event won't be so easy. Special thanks to my teammates, Nagpur district coordinators, Dr. Megha Leta and Dr. Pallavi. Last but not the least, I extend my thanks to all our participants in the webinar. You all are incredible listeners. Thank you guys for making this event such a success. With the enlightened learning memories, I declare the end of the webinar session here. Thank you, everyone. Stay healthy and safe. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the time.
Thank you. And I troubled Megha a little bit, so I'm I'm always running between many things, and she had to like literally keep on the back of me, ma'am, 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 ma'am. 5 times she sent me messages, so thank you for that. I did trouble you a little bit, but I hope it was good, and I think the ideas should spread. And then, and as therapists, you have innate potential because the medical background is there. But the idea that you have to get off that medical background and come into a more a humanistic background to do this, a heart background to do this, and then learn a little bit more as towards about what childbirth is, I think is super important. But thank you all. It was a pleasure. I really feel like I'm coming home to my constituents, my base, like this is where I started my journey. And it's lovely to be amongst you here today.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much, ma'am. You are an inspiration to all of us.
Thank you so much. So yeah, lovely. We'll do more of these hopefully in the future, and let me know how the feedback was from all your participants. That would be great. Finally, how many people did join in?